Fox News alert. President Biden taking questions from reporters a short time ago, but again, from a list of predetermined reporters, notably only 3 this time. The questions were on the multitude of problems the administration is facing right now, multiple crises, including the crisis at our southern border. Thousands of mostly Haitian migrants have been camped out under a Del Rio Bridge in Texas. The images have been shocking, to say the least. But video of Border Patrol agents chasing migrants on horseback have sparked the most outcry. President Biden himself has remained silent about the situation until today. But instead of owning what's been happening under his watch, the president threw Border Patrol under the bus.
Do you take responsibility for the chaos that's unfolding?
Of course I take responsibility. I'm president, but it was horrible what to see, as you saw. To see people treated like they did, horses barely running them over, people being strapped, it's outrageous. I promise you those people will pay. They will be an investigation underway now, and there will be consequences. There will be consequences. It's an embarrassment, but it's beyond an embarrassment. It's dangerous. It's wrong. It sends the wrong message around the world.
President Biden also dodged an important question from our own Peter Doocy.
Mr. President, how come you've never been to the border, Mr. President?
Amazing, always dodging those questions. Look, Bill Melugin Harris has reported just before we came to air that the photographer who took that picture, the infamous picture of the mounted Border Patrol agents in Del Rio, says he and his colleagues never saw agents whipping anyone, and the photos are being misconstrued not only by President Biden, who is lying about this. Moments ago, his own vice president doubled down on the lie. Let's roll the tape.
First of all, I've been very clear about the images that you and I both saw of those law enforcement officials on horses. I was outraged by it. It was horrible and deeply troubling. There's been now an investigation that is being conducted, which I fully support, and there needs to be consequence and accountability. Human beings should not be treated that way, and as we all know, it also evoked images of some of the worst moments of our history, where that kind of behavior has been used against the indigenous people of our country, has been used against African Americans during times of slavery.
Laughing while she says stuff. I don't understand it. It must be like a reflexive tick. Well, look, just to go back to the president for a second, the evidence does not show. The physical evidence does not show. The photographer has come forward, does not show what President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris are saying happened. It was SOP, standard operating procedure, to put law enforcement and Border Patrol on horses. You've heard that from both sides of the aisle. And I don't know if you caught it from Leslie Marshall. Just previously, a Democrat on my show, she went into quite detail about this, about how that is how they handle, and law enforcement all over the country in different situations handle it that way. So when the president says consequences, he is the judge, jury. He's not even willing to believe any other scenario happened other than the fantasy or narrative that he has in his head so far. Now, if evidence comes forth that something untoward happened, I'm sure somebody will rush to it. But right now, the only thing they're rushing to is to judgment. And that is harmful, because the very same people that you have called on to keep us safe over the last few months, when policies were driving our safety into the ground at that border, are doing their job night and day right now. And a healthy thank you would be wonderful. And by the way, why didn't Secretary of the DHS Mayorkas say anything when he saw those same men and women on horseback this week when he went to the border? I'm all shades of confused about how now Kamala Harris and the President of the United States want to point to a situation where the facts don't bear this out. Now, is it a terrible image? Well, clearly people are upset about it. So when the president says consequences, I hope he starts with himself, because those images came out of a situation that he created. So if you want to put everybody on the ground, you're going to need more people on the ground, which they've been saying no matter what their transportation mode is. You need more people at the border. Let's see if the president can rectify what has been broken under his administration for the last 8.5 months, 9 months.
Absolutely. And you have William Lajeunesse, Fox's reporter, saying Hey, they've been using horses for 117 years. His reporting showed Border Patrol feels that they've been scapegoated. They can't speak on the record. They can't defend themselves. So instead, they're being thrown under the bus. And they say twirling is a technique used often. It's to keep someone else, an illegal migrant, from grabbing the harness. It could be a dangerous situation. But hey, don't listen to the facts. Listen to Maxine Waters and her vicious lies.
What the hell are we doing here? What we witnessed takes us back hundreds of years. What we witnessed was worse than what we witnessed in slavery.
Emily.
I mean, I can't speak to Maxine Waters' emotional reaction to that, but what I can speak to is the facts. So I'm happy to educate her along with the president and vice president who don't seem to know facts. So what you alluded to, our mounted guard patrolled the border on horseback beginning in 1904. In fact, the horses were more important to the United States than uniforms because we ensured that our guard at that time had horses over uniforms, which came over 30 years later. And so the concept that this is somehow new, because it's a value add, the reason that horses are used, in addition to being able to traverse up to 50 miles a day, is that they can traverse terrain that vehicles can't. So when people say, oh, just use ATVs, or why aren't we using cars, especially there in Texas, which the president would know if he actually went down to the border, there's a particular variety of cane that grows there that makes it totally inaccessible to anything but horseback.
It's also easy to hide in, which is why they're often in between bushes and in that terrible terrain looking for people.
Exactly. And in terms of the reins, you know, keep in mind, guys, that assaulting or hurting an animal associated with law enforcement, that's a felony. So why would we have it protected as a felony and yet not enable Border Patrol or law enforcement to use techniques to have people stand back from the animal that is an extension of law enforcement that in the military we also designate as officers? It makes zero sense. And for these guys to simply invoke slavery and these horrible, atrocious images, instead of looking at the facts, the history, and the value add it performs. And now, by the way, Border Patrol is using no horses whatsoever. DPS, Texas DPS, is now patrolling the border. The state patrol is now responsible
we're
for
need
processing.
More people. Just real quickly, when things actually do equal the horrors of slavery, we should call them out. And when they don't, Maxine Waters and anyone else who's throwing it, it's not that they weren't bad images and for the people experiencing it, horrifying, and you can talk with them about it, but it's not like slavery. And we cannot say that things are like things that they're not.
100%.
Otherwise, everything is slavery, and it has no meaning, and we know that it does.
And if something worse than slavery happened, according to Maxine Waters, it happened on Biden's watch of note. So is she saying this of the Biden administration?
Well, she said she's
Kamala Harris
heed at him. I won't fill in the word for her.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But look, Pete, so regardless of what Kamala says and Biden says, we know that's not true. Emily just took us through the facts, but they're banning horses, right? That's what the Biden administration is doing. The Daily Caller had a very simple question. I'll pose it to you. You can give me the answer. What's the best way to stop illegal immigration? A, build a wall. B, ban horses.
Because it's not about stopping illegal immigration. This is the shiny object, the distraction that they could find to obsess about. The question to Joe Biden was not about horses and whipping, which has been completely debunked. It's fake news. The question was about the disaster at the border. And because of these images, which the photographer even says don't represent reality, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and Maxine Waters distract away. Don't look. Don't look at Bidenville. Don't look under the bridge in Del Rio, Texas. Don't look at the disaster we created. Look at this one guy on a horse using his reins around that's been totally misconstrued. And then for Max Harris, I'm so glad you said what you said. For Maxine Waters to say worse than slavery, what an insult to any slave or descendant of a slave who was actually whipped by a slave master. It's such egregious rhetoric. I don't even know how to respond to it, but they're using the horse thing to distract because it's all a disaster and they want more illegal immigration. They want it.
They do. And a lot of questions for Mayorkas and Psaki when they take to the podium at 2:30. Never forget, Mayorkas began saying he saw nothing inappropriate. Psaki said she was horrified. And now all of a sudden, facts out the window, we have Mayorkas who's horrified. Where are the fact checkers?